Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Tacoma Cyclist. I am The Tacoma Cyclist, and with me as always is my trusty sidekick, the Boogeyman. Today, we're going to be looking at something a little bit different. We're actually going to take a look at one of the more popular races here in the Pacific Northwest and talking through some race strategy. We're going to be looking at the Ridge Circuit Race and Time Trial. Now today, we're actually not going to be looking at the time trial portion. The Boogeyman and I both did the time trial portion followed by the road race. We're only going to be looking at the road race segment here. It's the same course. In the case of the time trial, it's 4 laps around this closed circuit course, which is actually a motocross course in the Pacific Northwest. And the road race is roughly an hour, so it's about 10 to 11 laps around this closed circuit course. So without much more introduction, here it is, the Ridge. Okay, so as I mentioned in the intro, we're going to take a slightly different approach here today. We're going to be not reviewing a product, but reviewing a race. And really the idea here isn't to review the race, but to talk a little bit about race strategy overall. And kind of show some areas where I personally failed and actually eventually got popped off the back of this. Although I'm not going to show where I got popped off the back. That would make for way too long of a video. You can also see that the Garmin was a little bit off there. It showed that I had started before I actually did. But it quickly gets back up to speed. I think that was a kind of a pressure change thing that was going on. So, as the Boogeyman can attest, we are approaching a really nasty hill, and on this course, which is a closed circuit, it's a 2.5 mile closed circuit, we're going to hit this hill about 10 times overall, and this hill is brutal, right?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, this is a nasty hill. It peaks up at around 17%, and it's not very long. It's a very short hill, but you're going to be putting out 800 to 1,000 watts of power to get up to the top of this hill repeatedly. So think of it as a very short duration sprint that you have to do over and over and over again. Noticing the speeds here, this is the Open Cat 4.5s. The Masters, which I looked at their footage as well and looked at some of their data, they didn't get up to 25, 26 right off the bat. They took a much more reasonable and leisurely approach, but I tend to find that the Masters, they all know they have to go to work on Monday. They're not trying to kill themselves. Cat 4.5s, there's a couple folks in there that want to be heroes, and they'll jump right off the bat. There's that 17, 18% right there, kind of a nasty, nasty hill. And you almost have to hit that in your big ring, so when you get to the top of this, your legs are going to be feeling it. First 4 or 5 laps, you can totally do it. It's no big deal. After 4 or 5 laps, you really start to feel it, and you may find yourself shifting down to the little ring. So as you can see by some of the data that's on the screen here, one of the things that I identified as my own personal problem is that I tend to get a little too excited in a pack when racing, and my cadence tends to go a little bit high. Now I realized that early on in this race, so you'll see me start to settle back into an 85 to 95 range overall in my cadence. But every once in a while I get really excited and shoot up there for like a 110 cadence, and then my heart rate feels that. It breaks me down pretty quickly. So that's something that I am particularly working on, is keeping my cadence at a more reasonable level to keep my heart rate at a more reasonable level. So you can see we've got another nice little hill here, and every time we hit one of these hills, we're going to get stretched out more and more. And one of the things, again, one of the places that I tend to fail is that as we get a little bit stretched out, I think it's, honestly, I try to be a nice guy when racing, and I think that works against me. The Boogeyman is really guilty of being a nice guy too when we race. Overall, a really courteous kid, which is great, and it's great for the sport, but the reality is that you have to be a little bit of an aggressive rider. And you'll see I occasionally let some folks in and tend to shy away when people start getting in really, really close. So, Boogeyman, what did you think about this particular section overall on the race course?
It was very painful and hard.
What about it made it painful and hard? What was it that was so annoying about this particular section?
It looked really easy, but then it was actually quite hard.
Yeah, and that's right. So you'll see that there's obviously a little bit of a downhill here going into a sweeping curve, and you can see the speed gets up pretty fast overall. But you really need that speed to carry you through, because what's coming up next here?
A big hill.
Yeah, a pretty steep little hill. I mean, it's a short hill. There's no long climbs on this. They're all short and punchy hills. And in this particular case, it also is directly into the headwind. So when you turn around this corner, you may not be able to tell it because these trees are pretty stiff trees. But on certain days here, on this day, actually, we were getting 20, 25 mile an hour headwinds during parts of the day, especially later on during the race when it was kicking up. You'll see the kid there on the yellow bike is actually a young kid, and he's really, really strong. Actually just took second in cyclocross nationals this past winter. And he rides in a lot of the adult races as well. Boogeyman rode with him a couple times, but he's in the next age class now, so they don't get to ride together anymore. So you'll see again, the cadence has started to settle back down again. The group is bunched up. As you start doing more and more of these hills, again, the group stretches out and then it bunches back up. And if you're not in the right place, and you can see I've kind of worked myself into not being in the right place, I'm now in the back third of the pack instead of in the front third of the pack. Again, I don't know if that's just me being nice and courteous or if that was just the way it lined up that day. I got outclassed, and that happens. So I typically try to stay in the front third of the group overall. It doesn't always work. And especially on a day like this where there's a lot of fast sweeping curves and the road is nice and slick, I do tend to be a little bit on the conservative side. So this section coming up here, Boogeyman, what's particularly cool about this next section coming up?
There's a lot of sweeping turns and downhills that are really, really fun.
Yeah, they're really fun. They're really, really fast. And in the wet here, they're fun. I mean, you kind of pray for dear life that you're going to make it through and live. In this case, actually, there was a pretty brutal wreck. I'm not going to show that here because I don't like to show wrecks. There was one of the guys on one of the teams here that was injured pretty badly. Although he did walk away from this, he hit the deck probably going around 30 miles an hour coming up on this sweeping turn here. So what you'll see is that the speed drops off dramatically. And this is an early season race, and I think people are still feeling it out. This is, again, open Cat 5, open Cat 4s. And a lot of the yellow numbers that you see here are rental numbers, which means that people haven't gotten their license yet. So some of these guys are new. When I see that, I typically shy away a little bit. I try to be a little bit cautious because you never know if this is the first time that they've ridden in a big group like that. And pardon the raindrop, that'll disappear in a second. This is that nice sweeping S-curve there. Again, the speed gets fast, but not uncontrollable because people are trying to feel it out. I think the fastest time, if you look at that segment on Strava, averages 35 miles an hour coming down that sweeping turn. And I can tell you, at that speed, it's pretty scary. Now we're into the finishing straight. So there's about maybe 500 meters here where we're in the finishing straight. That's the slightest bit of a downhill, and we have the benefit of a tailwind. In this case, again, the tailwind hadn't really kicked in strong yet, but you can see it doesn't matter. The speed is up there. We've got that slight downhill, slight tailwind, really making for to stretch out that line and make people go really fast. And again, this finishing straight heads right into what?
A huge, nasty hill.
Yeah, that really huge, nasty hill. So people tend to get the speed up as much as they can. The downside of that is we're obviously putting out a little bit of power to hold over 30 miles an hour, even with a slight downhill. This registers a negative 1%, but it's more like a negative 0.4%. So it's just ever so slightly down when it was ticking downwards. So people try to keep that speed up there, which wears on the legs, especially since it's a little bit longer on that finishing straight than it looks originally. So when you get to the bottom of the hill, you've actually kind of spent yourself a little bit. So what you'll see is people at this point slowing down just a little bit, surging just a little bit, slowing down just a little bit, surging just a little bit, and that's what really, really wears on you over a long haul. So the video is coming to a close here. This is the beginning of the second lap. We did 10 laps in total, and really we got to hit that hill pretty fast all 10 times. It's kind of brutal. But it's a great race, and it's a great opportunity to get out and learn. The reality is the most of the guys you see out here are out here to learn and have fun. So I can't encourage that enough. Get out, have some fun, learn, and you'll be catting up in no time.